What is sportsmanship? Welcome to Philosopher's Corner. I'm John. What is sportsmanship? Well, sportsmanship is the behavior of athletes in comparison to the ethics of the sport. So it's a moral analysis of how people conduct themselves when they're playing sports with each other. Now, each sport has its own sets of ethics, and as you'll find in every sport, each one has its written rules, and then they have their unwritten rules. Some sports allow for contact. Some sports don't allow for contact. Some sports allow for intimidation of the opponent, and some sports do not allow for intimidation of the opponent. Sports range from things that are born of violence, like something seemingly as refined as fencing, right? It's two people with swords trying to stab each other, right? Not born of peace, yet has highly defined ethics involved in ways to strike the opponent and ways to act, and they have a whole culture based around it. American football, extremely violent sport. People regularly get severely injured, and historically people have died playing the sport. Also has rules about the nature of the violence, and more to the point, natures of rules regarding the psychological intimidation one is allowed to impose and the spirit with which one plays. Football is a very wide-ranging thing. International football, soccer, of course, famously in international soccer, one of the greatest areas of sportsmanship. I mean, in the modern day, they have problems with the fans, but in terms of the athletes themselves, obviously the thing they're famous for is flopping, pretending to be injured or overplaying contact to try to get a foul called. And that's one of the determining factors of how sportsman a team is, right? Like some teams have reputations as physical, dirty teams or flopping teams, and some have reputations as these guys are very straightforward and they don't go give into the theatrics. And it's like that through the entire sporting landscape. You have the way the game is played out in terms of the rule book, and then you have the culture that emerges, and within that culture, there are do's and don'ts, right? And that ranges from the amateur levels to the professional levels. That's why when we watch children's sports, if you're observing them or you're seeing them, a lot of the parents are concerned with the athletic level of the child, but most of the parents, including the ones that are concerned about the athletic level of the child, are predominantly concerned with how the sporting activity develops the character of their child. And really what we're talking about that is sportsmanship. Because when you look at all sports and you realize that sports are sports. There's a game, there's competitors, there's a goal, and there's a winner, and there's a loser. They're all essentially, they're just sports. But what they really have in common is the fact that it's catalyzing interaction between human beings, and it's making them concentrate and value and compete in a way that challenges their self-discipline. It challenges their self-discipline in preparation, during the match, or game, or whatever it is, the contest is, and then afterwards. And in the heat of battle, how does one conduct oneself? Because people are watching, and the other athletes are interacting with you. And so in that way, sports ends up being not much more than a character reveal. And there are many different ways in which the sports try to promote certain sportsmanlike behavior or try to, incentivize good behavior or de-incentivize bad behavior. When I was attending West Point, we had a really interesting system because we had a very competitive intramural system. All the cadets were really, really good athletes. Everybody's pretty much letter winners in high school, and everybody was very coordinated, and it was required to play intramurals. And the way that intramurals worked is that they were run by cadets. So that meant the athletes were cadets, the referees were cadets, the coaches were cadets, and the leagues were ran by cadets. In terms of the league scoring, the standings were similar to international football, where when you got a win, you got 3 points in your win column, and if you got a tie, you got 1 point. And then what we had, which I do think would work for the world, was we had a sportsmanship rating for the match. And the referee involved would assign a sportsmanship rating that was added or subtracted from the win point total. So and most of the cadets acted well, so you get standard thing, didn't affect it. But sometimes when tempers flared or whatever, and people acted unsportsmanlike, because like any other place that has sports, we had rivalries. We had certain companies had old rivalries with other companies, and when you play matches with them, bad blood would come out. It's just the nature of human competition. And in some of those, we crossed the line, and you get deducted points from your standings total for your unsportsmanlike play. It's not just an individual penalty. It's not, oh, here's a red card, or you go in the penalty box, or you got to sit the next one out. It's, oh, well, you thought you had 3 points for a win, huh? Well, now you only have 2 points for a win, because your sportsmanship was so detrimental to the game and to the fabric of the social community that we have for this league. They even deducted a point. They do that in boxing. If you do unethical moves in boxing, they'll deduct you a point. And a point's a big deal, because a point means you lose a round. If you hit somebody below the belt, or you bite somebody, or you headbutt somebody, they'll take away a point. And so in that intramural league, they would do the same thing. If the team or a player exhibited extremely unsportsmanlike conduct, you would lose a point in the standings. And that's a big deal, because it's a very competitive league, and every point matters. So sportsmanship ends up being the human behavior that we most take away with us from athletics, right? And it doesn't just end with the contest, especially as you go up into higher levels of, if you go into professional athletics, you have the contest, and then they have the press conference, and then they have the media cycle after that, and how that game affects not just the behavior that they had in the game, but how they discuss in the press conference, how their reputation goes even after the press conference when they get home, because of social media and tweeting, and just generally how their behavior is displayed in relation to the contests that they're in, forms the opinion and the vibe on that particular athlete. And, history has all sorts of different guys who've demonstrated different versions and levels of sportsmanship. One of my favorite guys, I have a bunch of favorite athletes, but one of the things that I take into account about my favorite athlete is their level of sportsmanship. I don't know if everybody does. I think a lot of people do, and not everybody does. That's why, for instance, in basketball, they say the common people, the common consensus is that Michael Jordan's the greatest basketball player of all time. Well, I don't think he is. I don't think Michael Jordan's the greatest basketball player of all time. I understand why people say he is, and they give his championships, as a lot of evidence. They give his ultra-competitive nature. They give his statistics, and they give all these things. But what they never talk about is his lack of sportsmanship, because Michael Jordan was a psychotic, and Michael Jordan, and it's documented, would stalk his opponents at their favorite restaurants to psychologically intimidate them. He would verbally and psychologically and physically abuse his own teammates because he didn't feel that they were playing to the standard that would like make him feel good about his chances of winning, right? He would do all these things. And then also when he was on the court, he was absolutely over the line, psychologically intimidating and getting into people's heads and doing all sorts of just really untoward stuff. And he always kept a fine line to try to keep it technically within the rules of the game, and he wasn't the only one doing it. But when we're discussing who's the greatest champion, who's the greatest player, the greatest representative of professional basketball of all time, I have to discount him because basically he's a psycho. And he's a terrible role model, and I don't think that the greatest player of all time should be somebody that you look at and go, oh yeah, I love the way he played basketball, but the rest of him sucks, right? Because the sportsmanship dimension matters. For me, I think Magic Johnson's the greatest basketball player to ever play. And for me, a lot of it's based on his sportsmanship, because wherever Magic Johnson went, goodness followed. Even the people he was beating, they didn't hold it against him. I mean, maybe the Detroit Pistons, but like pretty much, and the Celtics, they didn't like it, but like nobody thought he was a bad guy. Nobody felt like psychologically intimidated by Magic Johnson. They were in awe of his magic, and they were in awe of his game and how he elevated everybody in his positive vibe and all sorts of things. And if his career hadn't been cut short, he would have had more championships than Michael Jordan. He would have had even more stats, and but more importantly, he would have had more love. Because Magic Johnson went around and spread love. Magic Johnson's the reason basketball went out to the world. It's not Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan's a psycho. And, and Magic is the one that brought the love of the game into the world. And he's the one that brought great sportsmanship and grace and style. And these things matter. Like, sportsmanship matters. It doesn't, you can win a bunch, but if you're a psycho, who cares, right? Like, in tennis, tennis has a history of great champions who have excellent sportsmanship. They kind of pride themselves on it. And of course, they have their bad boys and they get a lot of attention. But in the long run, people know that, like, that's not how you want to behave. Like, when you have a choice of, we got the fire department here. Let's give this a moment. So, yeah, whatever. So right now, probably greatest consensus tennis players. Yeah, tried to give it a break, couldn't let it. Right now, the greatest tennis player by Grand Slam title total is Novak Djokovic, and he's been conducting himself excellently. My favorite tennis player of all time is Roger Federer, and he's just class all the way around, and his sportsmanship is unparalleled, and he's been an amazing ambassador for tennis. And tennis has a long history of guys, like John McEnroe or whatever, who, brats or whatever, just like people, psychotics who can't control their temper. And that's humored, and that's allowable, and a segment of the population sees themselves in that, and so they exist. But is that the role model? Is that how you want your kid to go? Is that how you want to conduct yourself throughout life? Whether it's sports or business, it's about the behavior that you're witnessing. And as you go through the different sports, you can see, certain people, they handle themselves with class, even though, and it doesn't diminish any of their competitiveness. These are people who are at the top of their fields. In fact, if anything, great sportsmanship can really just enhance your game. It can really just enhance your game. And it can enhance your skill level and who you are and the respect that goes around you, because people go, oh, that guy's just great, or that girl's just great at whatever the heck they're doing. And they're nice about it. They have grace. They have class. And then they're also awesome at what they're doing. And so it frees people up so that when you're competing with people, not only are you competing with them, but then they can actually enjoy competing with you, right? Because at the end of the day, it's competition. It's not war. It's not a murder fest. It's sport. And when you play sports, you're presenting yourself out there, not just your physical abilities. You're presenting who you are out there as a competitor, your strategies, your intuitions, your instincts, and your etiquettes and ethics. So sportsmanship, in the long run, sportsmanship ends up being probably the most important thing that we take away from sports. because it informs our ethics, our character, and allows us to see our behavior while we're under stress in an observable, calibrated manner. So, yeah, what is sportsmanship? It's sports ethics on display. Well, thanks for spending some time here at Philosopher's Corner. I hope you found it helpful, and as always, have fun.